Now we're going to take a look at the boiler control panel. In this case, we've got a Heat Timer MPC Platinum. This is specifically designed for a steam boiler system. This measures outdoor weather conditions, also has some internal feedback from the building, all helps this boiler act a lot smarter. This is like the brain for the boiler, helps it decide when to turn on, how long to run for. Ultimately, the main goal is that it helps match the amount of heat that the boiler provides to the building to the weather outside. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at on the Heat Timer panel is all the information that it shows you right off the bat. You've got the date, the day of the week, the time of day, summer or winter mode, the outdoor cutoff temperature, the outdoor temperature sensor reading, and the condensate return sensor reading. So summer-winter mode, that tells you whether or not the boiler is providing heat in the winter or if it's just making domestic hot water in the summer. The outdoor cutoff temperature, this corresponds to the temperature which the boiler will no longer fire. So once you hit 55 degrees Fahrenheit or above, the boiler is not going to operate anymore. The purpose of that is to prevent the building from overheating during mild weather conditions. Next, we've got outdoor air temperature sensor. The purpose of this is that it tells the boiler to fire for longer when it's colder outside. It'll provide more heat the colder it gets. Lastly, the condensate return sensor reading. So the condensate return sensor tells the control when all the radiators are hot. It also lets the control know once the radiators have given up the majority of their heat and they're ready for another boiler cycle. Okay, first thing we're going to do, learning how to dive a little bit deeper into the Heat Timer panel. We're going to learn how to move around the menus with these buttons here. So fortunately it's pretty simple. The two main buttons you're going to use, the majority are right here. The first is the adjust button, which in order to move forward in the menu, you simply just push this button in. In order to go back, you hit the back button. Once you're inside a menu, you're going to twist this knob in order to choose different options. You would also use this knob in order to change set points. So first, let's look at system settings. Push the button to move forward. So first we've got the season, and there's two choices for that, winter and summer. Typically multifamily buildings use the same boiler for both heat and domestic hot water. And so when it's set to summer, that means the boiler's only listening to the aquastat measuring the water temperature in the boiler. Once you set it to winter, the boiler starts listening to the pressure trolls because it's going to be making heat to send up to the radiators. We're going to leave that at summer. Next, you've got the heat adjustment, and you'll see there's both a day and night setting. This corresponds to how long the boiler is going to run during the on cycle. Typically, a boiler has a 60-minute cycle, and so the higher the letter, D, E, F, G, the longer that boiler is going to run during the on portion. There's both day and night. The idea is that you can actually do a night setback and not provide as much heat because people are going to be nice and warm and cozy under their blankets. Next, we've got the outdoor cutoff temperature. Again, this is the temperature that once it reaches that outside, the boiler's not going to fire anymore. So once it hits 55 degrees during the day or 40 degrees during the night or above, the boiler's not going to fire anymore. And again, the purpose here is to prevent overheating in the building during mild weather outside. Next, we're going to go to more settings. Again, we're going to push this button to move forward in the menu. And here the first set point we've got is the system set point. And so what this corresponds to is the condensate return sensor. Again, that should be located on the farthest return riser. And so the idea here is that once you reach that set point, that corresponds to when all the radiators in the building are hot. The other thing that this tells you is when those radiators lose their heat and are ready for another boiler cycle. And so the way we figure that out is both the system differential and thermal lockout. These two things are tied together. So thermal lockout has an on-off, and we want to turn this on because it's an energy-saving feature. And once you turn that on, that engages the system differential. And the way it works is it won't let the boiler run until the condensate return sensor drops the amount of that differential. And as a starting point, we want to prevent the boiler from turning back on. We want to lock the boiler out until the condensate return reads 125. You might want to tweak it for your building, but 125 is a good starting point. That indicates that the radiators have given up most of their heat, but they're still able to maintain the ambient temperature in the apartments. And so if we want to figure out what does that differential need to be set at, if we know that we don't want it to turn on until 125, we take the system set point, 175 minus 125, which gives us a differential of 50 degrees. Next, we're going to look at system schedules. And again, this is tied to that day and night setting with the heat adjustment ratio. Currently this is set to 6 a.m. is when day begins, and then it's going to go until 10 p.m. is when the night cycle begins. And you can use the day button here, so this is when you're going to cycle through every day. In a multifamily building, we would expect to see this be the exact same schedule for every day of the week, even the weekend.